So let's talk again about conditionals, right? We started talking about conditionals, and then we'll see another conditional way and some other stuff, the switch statement. The syntax of a conditional is simple. If parentheses condition, right, you need the parentheses, they are required. What is a condition? Anything that will return a boolean, right? Anything that will yield a boolean. You remember assignment 1, you did 700 boolean expressions? Those guys, right? Go there. You put braces, you put the body of the if loop, right? We call that the condition. Whatever you put inside the braces is the body. And then optionally, you put an else statement and then more lines, right? Are the braces required?
No.
No, but almost yes. Both answers are right. They're not officially required by the syntax, but it's probably a really good idea to put them, because if not, what happens? If you don't put a brace, if you don't put braces, what's the body of the if? The next line, right? Whatever it contains. So it's very error prone, especially at the beginning. So always put braces. It's a very good idea. They're not officially required, but they're almost required. An example would be this, right? This is a function that returns what? Well, what type? Boolean is its parameter, right? But it returns, its return type is a string. What's the name of the function? Boolean to yes, no. And it takes as argument a Boolean, right? So parameter a Boolean. And so if that thing is true, right? If B, then returns yes, else return no, right? What would this print? False, right? Or no, because we did yes, no, right? Does this make sense? If statements. Did we need if statements for assignment 1?
Yes.
No. You can just return Boolean expressions. You didn't need an if. If you're playing with Booleans and combining them, you don't need if statements, right? When you're going from Booleans to something else, right, then you need if statements, right? Booleans to Booleans, you just do ors and ands and nots and things like that, right? Another example, absolute value of a number. Number is less than 0, and should we do it? This was an int. We could do it with doubles or something like that, right? Return the negative of that number, else return the number, right? That's how you get the absolute value of a number. Now, many times, do it. many times we need to do more than one if and nest this stuff, right? So we have this sign, public static. Let me do static at least. We'll see what this means. The sign function returns -1 if the number is negative, right? 0 if the number is 0, and 1 if the number is positive. Does that make sense? So what can we do? How would we do that? What can we do? There's many ways of writing this function. How could we do it?
If number is less than -1,
Less,
greater than minus
less than 0, right?
Yeah. It's less than 0,
then press yes. Sorry.
What are we doing? This is a function, so what are we doing?
return negative 1.
Returning a value, right?
Yeah.
We are not printing, we are not, right?
Else if.
We could write it like this. And I was gonna do the mistake. We could write it like this. What's going to happen if we try to write it like this?
It'll work.
We get a compiler error. What's the problem? Java says you have, right, what if neither one of those is true?
So it doesn't know that that's all the possible cases.
No, right, because that stuff may depend on, right, your data and things like that. So it doesn't know that that's all the possible things. Java doesn't know math.
So last one will come else.
Well, we could just do this. We could do this. We could, and I would probably write it like this. Now, what does this really mean? It means this, right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? That is called a nested if. We have an if statement inside either the if or the else, right? Of another if statement. Does that make sense? Some point in time you get confused. You probably should be able to do 1 or 2 levels. More than that should tell you that you're doing something wrong. Sometimes you need convoluted if statements. Many times you're doing something wrong. But we will do a couple of convoluted if statements in this class because that's the point of the class. In real life, you tend to, they are a smell. Like if I have 10 if statements nested, I'm doing something wrong. My thinking is wrong. Not my programming. Now, when you look at this nested if statement, it looks as if, since they are in different levels, looks as if one is more important than the other, right? Looks as if the check for number being less than 0 is more important than the other two. Does that make sense?
It looks like it, but it's
looks like it, it's not true. So we tend to write these things like this and indent them like this.
It's just like it's slightly easier to read.
We tend to indent them like this. So they are parallel with each other. Does this make sense? This I call chained if statements rather than nested if statements, right? And then we could nest. Does that idea make sense? What do you need to do now? Do 100 of this, right?
So, what's the difference between nested if and chain?
It's just the structure of the code.
Just the way this set up.
The way that it's set up and where you put the braces or not. In this case, we're actually breaking our rule, right? There are implied braces right here. Right?
Yes.
But we are not putting them to make it look prettier.
So they both do the same thing, it's just you're thinking in it, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Is there one that's like a best practice over the other one that will reduce errors, or?
No, because this is English and philosophy, right? This is where programming becomes philosophy.
Yeah.
And those tests, do you see them as three different tests at about the same level, or do you see them as fundamentally different? I tend to see them at the same level, but I'm not doing math. Maybe mathematicians see it as, right? 0 being the most important one, and then the other two are the same level, and so do nested, right? So it's more how you're thinking about your code.
You tend to do more nested stuff or change stuff in programming?
I tend to do more nested stuff, and again, if you're doing too many if statements, your code is wrong. So I tend to not. I tend to do more one level of if, and then sequencing of if statements tends to be okay. Like normally you would have like an if statement at the beginning of your function to validate all your data,
Yeah.
and then that's it. Right? Maybe one if statement.
I was just trying to think like consistency, like I think you want to be consistent how you program, so to have.
Yeah. At some point in time, this may there is clean code. It's a great book about code. Actually, Code Complete is an amazing book about this kind of stuff. Except that it's huge and encyclopedic and boring. It's not boring, it's actually cool, it's just large. Code Complete is 960 pages. So, it's not exactly bathroom reading. Clean Code is fairly decent. And is by Uncle Bob Martin. And it's a lot nicer. And there is, which one is the Kernighan?
It's only half as long as the Critique of Pure Reason.
Exactly. For you guys, I would strongly recommend you get this book. It doesn't necessarily mean buy it, right? Many of these books, you'd go read and then decide where. So I'm sure we have this one in our library. Borrow it, read it. This one talks it's a very intro book about becoming a better programmer. So kind of, if you have never done programming, not yet, but in a couple of weeks, you'll probably have enough knowledge that you could read that book and profit from it.
How many pages are in that book?
That one is simple. Like, no. 288. Later on, not now, the C programming language is an amazing book. C is kind of one of the most prevalent programming languages. It's actually super simple and very close to hardware, which makes it a really good thinking language. You don't want to start programming in C, but the book is amazing. It's 272 pages, and it covers everything you need. I mean, like, as far as writing, this is an amazing book. You probably don't want to learn C yet, but if you ever do, like, right? This one is a great book. It's by two of those guys. Kernigan and Ritchie and Pike, maybe one more guy, wrote Unix, C, and a bunch of these seminal things. I remember Kernigan because he has a weird name, and Kernigan and Ritchie was the C book. Pike was one of the other guys. There is Aho, which also did a lot of the theory, but they are Aho, W, and K, awk, the awk programming language. The K is Kernigan. All of those guys worked at AT&T at the time when AT&T did research. And so they did a bunch of this stuff. This stuff is amazing. This is a great book. Kind of the new batch. Bob Martin, the guy from Clean Code, has written a bunch of seminal stuff. The new guy, I mean, he's not that new. He is 60-something or something like that. He looks old. And Code Complete is weird but amazing. This guy used to work at Microsoft. He was involved in maybe Word or Office or one of those things. And this book is amazing. Later, at some point in time, read that stuff. And probably during this semester, but not. Do your assignment first. So we talked about if statements, nested and chained. One more example. Feel free to never use this, but you need to at least understand it. An if statement is a statement, right? It does things, it doesn't produce values, unless you do returns, right? But it does stuff, and this stuff may be returning or something like that. The ternary operator, the question mark operator, takes 3 arguments. The first argument, it evaluates the first argument, and then it yields either the second or the third, depending on whether the first argument was true. This is actually an operator, something that you add or subtract or something like that, right? So in here, you do stuff like int a equals 10. You have a and b, right? Then you have operators, so you can do stuff like a plus b. But you can also do a greater than b question mark 4 or 5. What would this return? What would this yield, right? If A is greater than B, it would yield 4. If not, it would yield 5. So in this case, it would yield 4, because A is 10 and B is 5, right?
Do they use the ternary operator a lot?
People do.
Okay, that's a good enough answer.
It is. Yeah, it's not necessarily a good thing to do, but it's something like realmen.itkish, they also, real programmers use the ternary operator. It's one of those things that's really cool to use, so a lot of people use it. Probably clearer to do an if statement, but it's actually fairly common to use the ternary operator.
Is there any reason why you absolutely need to use a ternary operator, or if it's just all?
No.
What about case statements? Do you ever need?
Case statements,
Is
you
there any-
never, right? You can do everything with if statements,
Okay.
but case statements actually make your code clear, and
Yeah,
we are
it
going
makes
to talk
it
about them in a
More
second.
convenient sometimes.
So case statements are more convenient. The same thing with the ternary operator. It is convenient sometimes. I actually use it way more than I should. Teaching this class has made me not use it as much. But I tend to use it because I learned to program in C. And Kernigan and Richie use it. And so I do. And it's really cool. If you have done some programming, use this class to get out of your system. Many times when you start with something, it seems really hard, right? So if you haven't done programming, then you may do one level of if statements or something like that, right? And that seems hard and complicated. At some point in time, you become really good at it. So you do 17 nested levels of if statements, right? Why? Because you can, right? And that shows to you how smart you are, right? This is not the right class, but if you know some programming, you can use this class to get that stuff out of your system. And then after that, you realize that you need to be smarter than the programmer to debug, right? Debugging is harder than writing a program. So if you write the code at the level, at the edge of your ability, you're not going to be able to debug that thing, right? The poor sod who's going to debug your code is going to be in trouble, and that poor sod may be you. Maybe you on a Friday afternoon when you're trying to get out of the office as quickly as possible. So you kind of, but you ought to go through that phase and then go down from now let me write the code in so simple a way that even I can understand it, right? You should kind of develop your ability. The data structures class is the one where you should develop your ability to write the most convoluted, simple possible code, right? Because you do it in C++ and you're using pointers, and so you do all sorts of weird things that you shouldn't. But that's a great class to get it out of your system. But this one maybe too. So by all means, use nested question mark operators. So we could write sign as right? Which one is shorter?
Ternary operator.
Which one is easier to understand? Which one would you rather debug? Which one?
The if one requires me to use like less mental energy.
Yes. Which one do you use when you want to impress your boss?
Use the other one and you act like it's so easy, and why can't you debug it just as easily as the other one? It's no problem.
Until you realize that you don't have to impress your boss, and then you start writing it the other way, right? You should write those kinds of things, and then spend 2 hours trying to debug those kinds of things and decide to never write them again. But you should write them before you can say, oh, now I don't want to write them again.
So which way is writing the best way? Which one is the best?
I would write it like this.
The second one, the first one?
The first one, this one. I would write it like this.
Why?
Why? Because it's easier to understand. Because there is less chances that I screwed that one up. Of course, I'd also write unit tests to verify that I didn't screw it up. But there is less chances of me screwing that one up than that one.
How about if you consider in space and the memory, which one is the best way to go?
One is, who the hell cares? Your salary is gonna pay for a nice server a week, right? Actually, your salary pays for 2 nice servers a week, right? You're gonna be making, in 5 years, you're gonna be making 100K. That's 2 nice servers a week. Who the hell cares? Right? That level of who the hell cares, right? Actually, the compiler will generate the exact same code, regardless. It will take maybe a little bit more to compile, but I don't even see how you could measure which one takes more to compile, right? Or that one is 20 bytes in source code, but there is no, right? You wouldn't be able to say which one will be faster anymore. And your time is much more valuable than computer time, right? Your salary pays for a nice computer or 2 a week. Not yet. Maybe, but will in 5 years, right? So optimize for you. And actually, if you screw that up, you may end up losing $1 million for your company, right? And most of the time, the screw ups end up being like this, right? Because what happens with the complicated stuff? If you see something that's super complicated, what do? You focus on that thing and you test it, right? And the testers will focus on that thing because that's what they know, right? So you end up screwing that one up, right? And doing this or something like that, right? And then that's what killed you, not all the complicated stuff, right? Complicated stuff, we tend to do it right. Simple stuff tends to get us, and then the good thing about computing is that your job will probably have a huge impact, right? But as Spider-Man says, with great power comes great responsibility. When you screw up, you screw up, right? And like at work, somebody just messed up a flag in a software configuration and we ended up with thousands of orders that were wrong, and we had to cancel and call the users and apologize and things like that. I was not involved. I was so glad that it didn't touch any of my systems. But, and at Microsoft, we were optimizing advertising. And so we were doing optimizations algorithms that would show the ads that you love on your websites. And we screwed up the configuration and we lost $1 million on a weekend. Woohoo! So good. That felt really, really good on Monday. But it is what it is. We probably made tons more for Microsoft, right? By optimizing those things, we'll be making millions.
Have you found this kind of cutthroat in that regards, or is it like they kind of understand like? It just depends on where you work at.
It depends on where you work out. Usually, to tell you the truth, Microsoft was a huge revelation. They are actually a lot nicer and a lot less cutthroat than most other places. Like, way nicer and less cutthroat than I expected, right? It's not that it's like, you have to work and you have to produce, right? But it's very, they have the money to basically hire a bunch of programmers and say, right, we'll let you lose for a year. And we were a tiny piece of Microsoft. We were selling $1 billion a year, right? So if we optimize 1%, that's 10 million, right? So our team of 5 people, right, we cost 200K each, so it's $1 million, maybe 2 million once you add Office and all of the other stuff. 1%. We paid 5 times our cost, right? And so that's all you need over a year, right? And we were doing, some things didn't work, but some things would do 1 or 5 or 10, right? And so but when you screw up, you screw up $1 million. It wasn't, we didn't really lose $1 million. We sold it the next day, it's just we didn't. But it is the kind of stuff that you do, right? And normally it is by one of those things. The stuff that is so simple that you don't think you could mess it up, you do mess it up. I haven't found, and I'm not quite in Amazon. I'm on an Amazon subsidiary, so we are not really Amazon, but I haven't found it cutthroat either. It's a different environment. It's a much smaller company, so it's a very different environment. But my group, at least at Microsoft, was really, really good. But this, where I am now, is really good too. It's just not that, it's very different, but they were both good. I haven't found, you'll become programmers. You'll be able to make millions for a company. They'll treat you right, just because, right? You're gonna make money for them. Let me talk about the switch statement and then let's go do some hundreds of examples. A switch statement is like a chained if, but slightly different. You want to do different things depending on a given set of values. And you're gonna hit specific values, right? So you do switch, you put an expression, and that expression now is not a Boolean, it's something that returns usually an int, or something like an int. You can do strings or some other things. Then you do cases and put the values that you want. You would put the code that you want to do, and then a break statement means get out of it, right? Get out of this switch statement. If you put several labels, case val1, case val2, then both of them will do the same code. There is a default for if it wasn't any of those guys, then do this, right? A good example is day name that will convert from the day, which in this case will be an int, to the string. We would switch day, which is an int, again, not a boolean, right? And now we go look, okay, case 1, so if day was 1, then return Sunday. If case was 2, return Monday, right? All the way to case 7, return Saturday, and then by default, return invalid days. So if you get something that's neither one of those things, you return invalid. Does this make sense? Could you write this with a chained if statement?
Yeah.
Which one would look prettier?
This one.
Switch, right? Cool. By the way, that's assignment, whatever we are on. Assignment 3? And you're, I think, since we are doing it with days here, I think you do it with months over there. And you have to do it with a switch and with an if, just so you see both. But
Like we are writing Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So why did you select that int data type? Why not string?
string is what we return.
Okay.
Int is what we get. So we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay. And string we are Monday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday.
Sorry?
String has those words Sunday, Monday, Tuesday.
Yes. String is what we return. Makes sense, huh?
This is one of the most difficult things for me, like when I first did Java ever, which was a while ago. It lasted for like a month. And I just had so much trouble thinking like, okay, int is a parameter, or like the day is
Day
a
is a parameter.
and we're not returning day. We're returning 7 or 1 or 2. We're not returning
Yeah.
int day. That was very hard. That was not intuitive to me at all. But it's only because I've done it before and failed that it's like, oh, I get it now.
How will you make it stick? Do a million of this, right? And then change it and now do it the other way around. Now, we could do other things. And this, I probably wouldn't write it like this, but you can have a bunch of labels that fall into the same thing. So if you want to know how many days are in a month, and we're assuming that we don't have a leap year, right? We are doing, okay, if it's 1, 3, 5, 7, 8, 10, and 12, we return 31. If it's 2, we return 28, and 4, 6, 9, and 11, we return 30. And just in case you told me something otherwise, I will return 0. Kind of as my default or something like that, right?
So we don't necessarily need to say default, but you need to return something.
Well, since I put it outside, it happens, right? That switch statement happens, and then if I return, I end the function, I return. If not, I keep going, and so that will be executed right after you end up the switch. It's the same effect, but it's slightly different,
Yeah,
right?
you just don't. You can write either way.
Yeah.
Key.
Makes sense. We could have written it as a default, return 0, or just put it outside. Let's go do FizzBuzz, because this will prepare you for programming interviews. Now, it's one of those things, right? Somebody said, oh, it sucks so much, people cannot even do simple stuff like FizzBuzz for programming. And they were proposing, well, you should do simple code interviews to at least validate that that person can program, right? And then, of course, dumb people heard, oh, you should do FizzBuzz as an interview question, right? They were putting it as an example, right? And so people still ask FizzBuzz as interview questions. It's absolutely idiotic to ask it because now everybody should know that thing. But it's kind of a meme in programming. What is the idea of FizzBuzz? You start counting, right? And if the number is divisible by 3, right? You start counting, 1, 2, right? If the number is divisible by 3, instead of saying the number, you would say fizz. And if the number is divisible by 5, instead of saying the number, you would say buzz. And if the number is divisible by both, then you would say fizz instead of the number. Does that make sense? Shall we do it?
Sure.
Count.
1,
1.
2,
3.
No.
No. Whoa. See.
fizz.
It is.
3.
No, he said 3. He said fish, which is fish. So you say
4.
4.
Which number?
it was 5, which was buzz. So no 6.
No, it's not 6.
Oh,
You gotta
fizz.
say
Fish,
Ten.
buzz. Does it make sense? You understand what the problem is? Probably shouldn't be saying this, but before it was this, I learned it in Spanish as a drinking game. If you mess it up, then you have to drink. And after 2 mess ups, then you're gonna mess up every time. Which you shouldn't do, but. So, how do we write this function, right? Let's make it as a function that's gonna, right, just given the number, return either the number or fizz or buzz or fizz buzz, right? What do we do?
we're gonna use if.
Okay, let's use if statements. What do we do?
If number divided by 3.
I would say if number mod 3 or mod 5. And then
Oh,
I would-
mod 3 is 0.
If number, yeah. Okay, let's do. I don't do those things. Return n modulo m. Right? If it's divisible by 3, then what do we do?
A return pass. Else. By 5.
How can we convert that number into a string? We can cheat. Is this correct?
No.
Why not?
Because if it's FizzBuzz, it's going to return fizz.
Right? We are missing FizzBuzz, right? Does that make sense? So we could write it like this.
Okay.
Is divisible by 3 and 5. We don't really need the else's, but that makes it prettier.
So you can just do as many else steps as you want to, but you're just gonna end up confusing yourself eventually.
Yes. Usually else if I tend to not see them as terribly complicated, right? What would be the problem with an else if? What do you think happening, right? You would probably miss, right? If you're doing 10, chances are that you'd only consider 9 conditions, right? Like, and it's very hard to see that you're missing the 10th condition.
Or if like 2 conditions are met by one thing like
Yes, like, right? If it was that kind of stuff, so it's, yeah. You can see where you're gonna make the mistakes, right? The problem really is with having 10 conditions, not with any particular thing, right? Does this make sense? Shall we try it? Actually, I messed up. Should be fizzbuzz, but lowercase. I need to make it static. And then we can make this guy static. Ah. We don't know for statements yet. So, what should this print?
Last one
Buzz,
Buzz, fizz, 7, 8, and fizz buzz. Is this cool or what? You are now able to be hired as a programmer because you can pass fizzbuzz.
what happened to the 0 in there? That,
What would happen?
I think that gives you a variable.
Print 0.
I don't know. That depends on, is 0 divisible by 0?
That's what, I don't know what that
I
means.
think it is, but
error.
no. 0 is divisible by 0, right?
Yeah.
So you get fizzbuzz. It's divisible by 3 and by 5.
Yeah.
Not by 0, sorry. It's divisible by 3 and it's divisible by 5, so you get fizzbuzz. It's slightly weirder what the heck happens when you do this, and I have no clue whatsoever. It's math, it's not, right? It's nothing to do. Oh, well, yeah, when they are divisible, they are divisible. There is actually a variation that will do, rather than just divisibility, also do it if they end in the number, in the digit, right? If the last digit is 3, right? Because for 5 is the same thing, right? So for 13 you would also say fizz.
I saw something similar to this on YouTube for like the Google, like they haven't, so you should always like try to ask like conditions, like can I assume that they're always, whenever you know it's positive, or, you know, try to like get more information. Well,
Many times when you are interviewing, right, what they want, actually, sometimes the interviewing will be an a-hole and what they're trying to do is to feel superior to you. But most of the time, what they're trying to do is to figure out whether you can think, right? And so you asking reasonable questions helps them see that you're thinking. So even if you don't get it officially right, it shows them that you're thinking. But it depends, right? For super simple stuff, you should be able to do FizzBuzz without thinking, right? Or the equivalent to FizzBuzz, because they're not going to do FizzBuzz without thinking. For more complicated stuff, you should be asking questions, and many times you don't actually code. You just, did they ask the right questions? Did they give me the right idea? Yes, but. Could we do FizzBuzz with a switch?
Yes.
Yeah, sure, why not?
How?
Case.
But then your case what? Like, what would you do?
Case
Case 5.
is divisible number 3.
We do switch, and what is the expression that we are switching?
I guess you can.
We're gonna switch between fits and pass.
Sorry? We'd switch on. We switch on number. What do we need to do?
Case 5.
But we need to be doing stuff like.
You can't do like case and then some boolean. You have to do.
An expression? No, right? If you want expressions, then you do ifs.
Oh, okay.
Case have to be specific values. So FizzBuzz would, I mean, you can, because you could just switch on true and false, right? So you could switch, but FizzBuzz with a case statement would be horrible, right?
What do you mean? How would you do it with the case statement? When you have to.
Actually,
all
one thing that you could do, right, is switch is divisible
Mm,
3. So this is equivalent, right?
yeah, case 1.
True.
Yeah, case true.
So this is basically equivalent to oh, they don't even let me do it. This is logically equivalent, but I'm not allowed to switch on booleans. I can only switch on this guys.
You
So
can normally do a case true or case false. The problem
you
is that
you
it's-
can't in Java. Yeah, they
You
don't let
cannot?
you. No. What you could do is switch number %15. That actually wouldn't be terrible. Case 3.
Wouldn't you be looking for case 0 though? Yeah, case 0.
3, 6, 9, and 12, you return fizz. Case 5.
10. Else return number. Else return number.
We don't say else, we say default.
Or not else, yeah.
Same thing, but
Isn't there a case else syntax?
nope.
I think that's
Not in Java.
C++.
Not in C++ or any of those guys. They all use default. Python or Ruby may have that kind of stuff. C-ish languages use default because C uses default.
So this only works if you have a limited data set then. So
Case only works when you have a standard data set. The modulo operator, right, allows us to basically convert this into a standard data set, right? Because you really only have 15 cases. And you can wrap around. I wouldn't recommend doing it this way. This is a lot nicer. You could do it with a nested if statement or something like that, but oh, and this one is cool, yeah. So after we have prepared you for job interviews, let's do this because this is important. How can we return the maximum of two numbers? The largest one of those two numbers, right?
Compare if A is greater than
A greater than B, then return A.
is maximum, else B is the maximum.
Let's return B.
Do we care about equal?
No, because it's still returning a number, and we're not returning A or B. We're just returning the value.
You're returning the value, so it doesn't terribly matter which one did we return, right?
Which is what confused the hell out of me when first doing this. Because it says in A, and it's like, so shouldn't we return what? No, you don't. You return a value.
Well, you are making copies, right? So you are returning the actual value.
Okay, but
A is an expression that has a value, but yeah.
So in this case, which number is going to return? The same number? If
It's
we
3
equal-
and 3. Who the hell cares? It's 3. There is no different trees.
Maximum 3.
Yeah. Now,
If you compare 3.00 and 3, would it spit back something different?
these are ints, so they get transformed to ints. If you had doubles, then
Okay.
maybe.
Okay.
So, how can we make max 3? The maximum of 3 elements, 3 arguments, A, B, and C. So, what do you?
you could
What,
have a nested if, or you could use max 2.
Yeah.
so,
Compare-
with the nested if, what can we do?
compare A with B first, then
How do we compare? A
is and A is greater than B, C.
and A is greater than C? And what do we return?
Return A.
Return C.
Okay.
Would this work?
How about
He's seeing the problem.
yeah, there is a problem.
Let's see. Oh, well, yeah, I'll mention something else in a second. Let's do 1, 1, or
They're all the same. They're all,
what are we going to return? What should we return?
10. Should return 10.
What are we going to return? Print. -1. Why? What's our problem?
Because we're assuming then that C is.
That they're not equal, right? This will actually fix it. By the way, your screen doesn't have this stuff. Mine does. Wow. I have nice fonts with ligatures.
How you did that?
I don't even remember, and I don't know how to take it out. I should take it out because this will confuse you guys. But now I don't even remember. Find coding ligatures or something like that. Fonts actually have ligatures. They have this idea of when these two characters are present, printed like this. So they do like the FI are supposed to be kerned and ligated together. And so they did that magic with this stuff, which is really cool. Mwah. Now this would work. There's a much better way of writing this.
Okay, you just went up, take the first example we did and compare it with that one.
Yes, right. I already have max 2, right? That gives me the maximum of this 2, and I compare it with this other one, right? Does that make sense? This is the power of abstraction, right? By writing super simple functions that even you can debug, and then combining them, you write less code, right? And you have less chances of messing up. Make sense? One other thing, just so you know, return inside a function ends the function, right? You're done and you return. Many people hate what I do. I do it all the time, sorry. I have several return statements inside a function. Many people hate that and would do stuff like this.
People say, yeah.
Big. I find this horrible. Find this just extra code for no particular reason, right? If you have weird return statements, it makes your code hard to follow. If they're all parallel, I don't see a problem. But just be aware many people will program like this. Especially in intro to programming classes.
Well, what you're gonna see for me is I'm gonna do it like both ways in like the same assignment. You know, I'm not even gonna think.
Yeah,
about
no,
it.
that's perfectly.
It's gonna be all over the place and very messy.
That is the point of the code reviews, right? I don't know if you have noticed. I actually, well, depends. If you do kind of the standard stuff, as I expect you to do it, I will not leave comments. If you do weird stuff, I tend to leave comments on your code reviews, right? Go back to your merge requests and look at them. That is, to me, that is the point, right? I mean, that's part of the teaching. I will actually comment on your style and things like that. Like, a bunch of people on assignment 1 were using if statements. I was like, no, you don't need if statements, right? Do it without ifs, and that's going to make you a better programmer, right? Right now, many times you end up, I will be bugging you about indentation style, right? If you indent, remember we talked about indentation, right? Put your braces either on a separate line or at the beginning of the previous line. That's perfectly okay. Every brace opens a new level of indentation, right? If you are doing nested if statements and things like that and you don't indent correctly, your code becomes really, really hard to read, right? Something like, even something like this, right? It doesn't even let me. It doesn't let me indent wrong. having something like this, much less something like this, makes your code really hard to read, right? When you have nested if statements and things like that, if you don't do that, your code is wrong. It's guaranteed to be wrong, right? I mean, it's like there's no way in hell that you can debug these things, right? Your IDE will have, if you go look at it, it will have stuff for indentation, but indentation should also become automatic to you guys, right? Every time you open a brace, open indentation, be really consistent. That's gonna make your life easier. It's even worse when you do stuff like this and your indentation is inconsistent. Then it's like, oh God. So be careful with indentation. It's kind of a standard thing if your code's not indented correctly. With this stuff, you are going to have problems where you forgot to close one brace or something like that. And if you don't indent, it's impossible to find. Right? Because Java will tell you where it thinks that you're missing the brace, but the missing brace may be 20 lines above. So, any questions on if statements or conditionals? No? Switch. So no if and switch. Next class, we will start getting really confused with recursion. We'll spend next week on recursion, which is this really cool idea of what happens when I call myself. I call this same function inside the function, right? We'll see that that enables us to solve many more problems. Basically, we'll not see it, but it enables us to solve every problem. If you have if statements and recursion, you don't need anything else. You don't need any for loops or anything like that. But not that you should, but you can. Cool. I will see you guys on Monday.